So please join me in welcoming Christophu Dieckmannu and Jolanta Vickutė.
A sincere thanks to Liana for having us here, for offering this space to talk about issues that are so important still at this day. I'm smiling because, not because the topic is so complicated, but because I'm seeing so many familiar faces in the crowd, fellow historians and friends and other dear people. So thank you very much indeed for coming to this talk today. I have here a friend, I hope I can call you a friend, and a fellow historian whose book I've read many times and I'm using as a handbook when I'm teaching the Holocaust in Lithuania at the Lošta Museum, where we have collected a team of educators and guides. So for them this book is important. It's written in a language that's accessible and simple, but does not simplify how it all happened. So for me, it's a great pleasure, personally and professionally, to be here at this event. So thank you, Liana, and thank you, Kristen, for coming here and to talk about this book. Since I see some historians in the crowd and I see people who probably have read the book, I want to kick off this discussion by simply discussing some very basic terms, and that is something most historians do. The topic is how did it happen? It deals with a subject that we call the genocide of European Jews. We call it the Shoa, or we call it the Holocaust. So I want to ask you, which labels now are you using in the book? Which one do you still find appropriate and accurate enough as a specialist of the Holocaust in Lithuania after so many years, and after the archives have opened and the Soviet Union is long gone, and the sort of the terms that we inherited, some of them are still in use and some of them maybe are not. So that is sort of the question is about the definition of terms that are still in use to this very day.
Thank you, Jolanta. Thank you very much for hosting me. I enjoy things like this because you sit, as an historian, you sit all the time, read and read and read and read and read. And when you actually visit the society you write about, I mean, our common history, 80, 90 years ago, it's always exciting. It's not the first time that I'm here, but each time it's enriching, yeah. And I'm sure this time will also be good for me. I'm learning as well. And those who teach also know when we're teaching, we always learn ourselves, right? So I'm actually happy about the occasion. Now, the question of terms and methods is crucial because they frame our questions and our way of thinking. Now, you've mentioned the big terms. Genocide, Shoah, Holocaust. Yeah? So when I started, I knew, of course, Holocaust. And why did I know the term Holocaust? Because of the TV series, Holocaust. At the end of the 70s, when this wonderful, historically highly problematic, but with this huge effect having, especially in Germany, with those 4 parts of telling the history of the family Weiss from Hamburg. And Meryl Streep was the main character, and everybody fell in love with Meryl Streep at the end of the 70s. So that's how the term Holocaust became spread. It existed before, here and there in different contexts, yes, but from that point of time, end of the 70s, it spread in the English and English-speaking and thinking world, but also in the European world. I did not know the term Shoah. Yeah? Because Shoah is the most dominant term from the Jewish perspective on this. It's actually a sort of a Hebrew translation of Churban. And Churban is the main word from the Yiddish side of the catastrophe that happened to the Jews in Europe. So that's this perspective, the Jewish perspective. So that's why today I use Shoah, because it's all like it's most of the time a good idea to look at things from the Jewish perspective, from the victim's perspective first, to get them, and not only from the perpetrators or other peoples involved. Yeah, and you can For example, for the murder of the gypsies, of the Roma and Sinti, we have the same, paraimos. We say paraimos because it's their word for this. That's why I prefer Shoah for this, and it's specific. It means the murder of the attempt to murder all European Jews. That's what it means. Now, the term genocide is of a different category, because it was accepted by the UN, by the UN in 1948 as an initiative mostly from Raphael Lemkin and some others to find a legal term, a judicial term for the mass murder that had happened. Not only against the Jews, but against all other peoples during World War II. Yeah? And even before. The Holodomor, for example, also figures under this term genocide for Lemkin. Yeah? Now, the hopes with this term were high. Because this will, once we can attach the term genocide to an event happening, the international community of people will be mobilized, will react, now will prevent the genocide. That's the purpose of the term genocide. Now, if we can identify ongoing genocide and ongoing mass murder with the term genocide, we can go against it. Yeah? And I am one of those who say this actually never happened. It never happened. And it's a judicial term, and I don't know, so it kind of was somehow in the background when in the Yugoslavian wars in the 90s, with the ethnic cleansing, somehow there. It was somehow there with the Burundi and Rwanda problem, with 800,000 people killed in 4 months. But did it lead to any intervention from outside? In Yugoslavia, yes. No, but in Africa, no. Yeah. Now that's a judicial problem and of international politics. Now for history, this term is even more problematic. Because the discussion, once you use it, and you can see it right now with Israel, is all the time whether yes or no, is it genocide, is it not a genocide? And it's not about the issue itself. It's about the stamp. It's about the stamp. Yeah? So it, in the use of it, as human beings and as historians, it prevents often looking at what is actually going on, because our question is framed by the term. Does it fit the UN definition from 1948, which is in itself a compromise? Yeah? For example, you know that the Soviets intervened, there must be no social category here. Because that would have turned a lot of the policies of the Soviets into genocidal policies. They did not, of course they did not want that. So the term genocide is for me the most problematic. Now you can say, well, look at the result of genocide studies. There's a whole branch developing. And to make it short, for me as a historian of the Shoah, genocide studies, most of it is basically useless. It's useless, it doesn't help me in understanding what is happening. Very often, in the framework, in the background of these terms, is the hope, as with many left historiography as well, on the left side, that there's a system of history which we just need to discover. There's a certain structure. Oh, when we find those mechanisms, how it developed in different places at different times. If there's the same structures, we find it in there and there and there and there at different times, then we know how it works, we have a mechanism, and then we can prevent it. Now, do we have a mechanism like that? Do we have a structure like that? I would say no. And if you pretend to have one, you're simplifying stuff too much. You're simplifying. It doesn't work. Yeah? History, there is, sort of as a teacher I would say, there is no law in history. There is no law. Like it always develops like this. And that is in the background of this kind of systemic studies, like genocide studies. Oh, if you find the mechanism, we can put this and this and this and this, and then we turn this screw and this screw and this screw, and then we can prevent it. I don't see that. I don't see that. So there is no law in history. Like a hidden structure which we need to discover, like the Marxists believe. There's a hidden structure here. No, which goes like that. And we just need to know about it, and then we can intervene. It doesn't exist, I mean. It doesn't exist. How is history made? It's by the choices of people and of groups. And the interrelations between them, by the power relations between them. By the choices of groups. That's how history is made. And not by some hidden structure that we are just sort of performing on the surface and there's some hidden beneath. No. There's only the surface. Do you have an idea what I'm talking about? Okay. So that's why the term genocide is highly problematic, and genocide studies is for me only partially useful. Of course, yes, it's interesting. Yeah? But does it really inform my research? There hasn't been one case actually. Yeah? My research is informed by what I take from the sources. I was very glad for your introduction about it's not so easy, it's not so simple. Because we all love fairy tales. Yeah? We all love those simple stories about the bad guys and the good guys, yeah, and the martyrs and the victims and the heinous Nazis which came in from the moon, yeah, and then disappeared in 45, and the same in all of Europe. Yeah, there never were fascists in Lithuania. No. In a totalitarian Rest, another one of these big categories, terms, totalitarianism. All under totalitarian rule turn into victims, per se, by the term, no matter what happened.
So in a way it brought me to my other question about the groups that were part of how did this happen, because it did not happen by, out of nothing, right? And there were actual groups that took part in the killings,
yes,
or who came up with this plan. There was someone, at the helm of it, who initiated it. And we have this very, very broad label that we use as historians, and we call them the perpetrators. Are you happy with this label, or do you see problems with this? Which term would be better these days? I remember it from our discussions where we were trying to label one of the galleries in the museum, right? Do we use the term perpetrators, or do we come with the term those who participated in the Holocaust? Because we were just not really sure that this word, is accurate enough, is good enough to reflect the realities that were happening on the ground. When the war broke out and when the Holocaust started. So for me, that question is, how do you define that group who was, initiated it all, and then, stood at the helm, who came up with this, hatched this plan to, mass murder a very specific group of people. I mean, Jews, and let's not get into others yet.
Yeah. I'm grateful for that question, actually. I've been thinking about that a lot, because perpetrator, again, is a judicial term. And almost all of it, actually, of Holocaust historiography is coined by court thinking, by judicial thinking. So historians are supposed to be judges. And this is not only of Nuremberg and of all the post-war trials. It's in the grain of modern historiography itself. Like in the 19th century, there was a huge debate: what is a function of history? Is it to judge people, Völker zu richten? Will it tell the value of the various people? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they worthy? Are they cultural? Shalom. Ja?
Sehr gesund.
Sehr gesund. Dankeschön. So, is history a tool? Is it actually das Weltgericht? So the court over all history. Schiller, Friedrich Schiller, Weltgericht. So, if we stand before this God of history, do we, like this? Or is it to learn lessons for the future? Is it to learn lessons for the future? To find those hidden structures? This is 19th century in German discussion, Ranke. Yeah? And then the best way out of this is, well, good questions, but let's first of all find out how did it happen. Before we go to judgments, before we go to lessons, let's first know what actually happened, without that question in mind. First, empirical, sort of modern words, empirical reconstruction and analysis, and then see what about the values, what about the morals, what about the judgments, what about comparisons, what about the good or bad thing. Yeah? It's a bit artificial, this distinction, but for me it works. So, the judicial terms we're using, perpetrators, and it's not only perpetrators, it's all of them. Collaboration is a judicial term, not from its beginning, but from the end of World War II. Collaborator, yes or no? Did you betray your fatherland or didn't you? It was not the question, why did you behave in this way? That you're bad because you collaborated. That's the purpose here. The same with victim. It's a judicial phrase. Yeah? And nowadays, if you turn into a victim, we're off. Oh, to be a victim is cool. Everybody tries to victimize themselves nowadays, in a way. Yeah? So, the same is true for the term bystander. Same is true for the term bystander. It's also a judicial term. And the first notion of this term bystander, I know there's another question on that, but the first bystander it was the effort of the perpetrator to turn himself into a bystander. I'm only a bystander, I'm not a perpetrator. I'm not responsible. So this whole set of terms, meaning the whole categories of thinking we are using. Now just think of Hilberg, Raoul Hilberg, the initiator of perpetrator studies, not of Holocaust studies, of perpetrator studies. He was sitting for years in Virginia with the German documents from the Nuremberg trials, with court material. Yeah? But he never came to Vilnius to the Central Archive. Never. Yeah? So his thinking is, of course, judicial thinking. Yeah? And it's there. You can't get rid of it. No way. No? For example, this book is a synthesis of the big study, right? And for the big study, I looked at overall about 140 trials, court material, 140, and about 15 of them are really big. Yeah. So my own thinking was guilty or not guilty. What did he do at this point of time? Where was he? How much power did he have? All this. And for the writing of history, you have to get away from that. Because we're not writing sort of a verdict. When we're making good history, that's what I believe. Good history is not a verdict. It explains and leaves the judgment to the reader. So historians are not judges. That's the basic thing. Now, of course we have perpetrators. We have people who do very evil, who do crimes. Perpetrator is defined by crime. Yeah, that's the judicial context. Of course, we have a lot of people who commit crimes, men, women, everybody, all over Europe, on all sides. Now, how do you explain what these people did? Now, how do we find out? Who was they? Why did they come up with these plans? Yeah. Now, my basic approach is that's why we have a plural in the title of this event. It's voices. You need to listen to many voices. You need to have many perspectives in order to understand the result. So if you look for World War II and the Shoah only at the Germans, you understand half of it. But only half.
So here's my other question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, very much sort of head on following what you just said. We talk about how this happened, but maybe we should also talk about how did it begin. Because so far we'll be talking, as you said, the focus has been on Nazi Germany, but about the role of the Soviet Union in how it began and how it happened.
Yeah, I would like to turn it into two questions. How did it begin? And what's the role of the Soviet Union? how did it begin? So, the main group who committing this are of course the Germans, of course. And we know which group it was. It was a certain group of politicians, policemen, economic people, basically, and some cultural people as well. But there's a certain group. Now, if I want to know, and this back to methods, the very beginning, back to methods. If I want to know why does a group make certain decisions? How do groups make decisions? I have to understand their experiences. I have to understand the experiences of the groups I'm looking at. And experiences doesn't mean what they actually lived through. It means what they make of what they lived through. Experience is an interpreted version of your own past. Where do people come from? On which basis do they decide? They decide on the basis of their experiences as their interpretation of what they have lived through. I've gone through this, now what is this? And the future comes in through expectations. Where do I want to get at? What is my goal? What is my sense? Yeah, what is my target here? What do we want to do? So, experiences and expectations. So for experiences, I have to find out what triggers them. What are the key events and the key interpretive moments of what they have gone through. Now for the Nazis, for the German National Socialists, it's very clear 1918. It's very clear 1918. And 1918, not as it actually happened, which wasn't actually so bad. Yeah? It was much better than in Hungary, for example. Yeah? Hungary lost 60% and 70% of its people, like more or less, yeah? In 1918. Yeah? Austria shrunk to like this. Germany shrunk a little, 10%. Yeah? Okay, there was democracy and revolution and all that. Yeah? And the war, of course, the war was lost. Yeah? And the Nazis couldn't take it. Not only the Nazis, a big chunk of the German society couldn't take that 1918 happened. Meaning World War I was lost, and they wouldn't accept the defeat. And they believed if we don't get strong very fast again, we will vanish from the planet. They were not Marxists, they were biologists, they were racists. Meaning biology and the alleged fights within biology are determining what we are living through. So fights among peoples is something nature gives to us. This social Darwinistic thinking is deeply ingrained in this. So if we are not strong enough, we will vanish. Another 1,000 years and we are gone. We Germans, because we lost this one, and you see, strong, they are strong, so we are gone. Now, these people said we have to undo 1918, these Germans, we have to undo 1918. That was the trauma. And when you read through the sources, and those historians of us who read World War II documents from the German side, find this again and again and again. Never 1918. Do not repeat 1918. Niemals wieder 1918. All the time. Listen to Hitler. Listen to Himmler. Listen to Heydrich. Yeah? Listen to Goebbels. It's all the time. Like this. And this frames the basic thing. Now, that's the German trigger point. So to be mean, I would say, we Nazis want to make Germany great again because 1918 happened. And once we can do that, we're good. And what was a problem in 1918? What caused the defeat? Social disaster, the left, and the Jews. And the liberals also. Yeah? So if we want to don't repeat the mistakes of 1918, we have to be harsher against, no? We have to avoid social crises, we have to avoid leftist policies, we have to avoid any Jewish involvement into our well-being, and we have to get rid of the liberals as well. Yeah? Who are the enemies of 1918? Now, if we get somehow near a situation of 1918 again, we have to be very radical in this point. This, so just in parenthesis, explains, well, it kind of gives us hints why the more difficult the war went, the more the killing rates goes up. Usually we wonder about this. Well, the Germans are Herrenmenschen, we are the racist number one, so everybody beneath us has to go. But why do they? Okay, this is allegedly explains some killings. But why, when you go, oh no, this is difficult. Why did they kill in 1944? The Jews of Hungary. Why that? 500,000 people. Why? Because this situation was difficult. Not despite, but because. The more difficult it gets, the more radical we have to go against the enemies which caused 1918. So that's for the German side. Expectations, experiences, expectations. Lithuanian side. When you look at the Lithuanian document through 2040, 41, 42, 43, 44, what's the aim here? To undo 1940. To undo 1940. That's a trigger point here. All the most radical, so the extreme fascists on the right, the moderate rightists, and even some social democrats and liberals said, okay, we have somehow undo 1940 and let's cooperate for that and use the Germans for that purpose. So the trigger point is here, the Soviet takeover and annexation and sort of attempt at destroying Lithuanian interwar society. And everything that's good for that cause is okay. And everything that goes against that cause is not okay. Yeah? And how is that possible? Think from a different angle at 1918 again. When was the first independence of Lithuania? 1918? Under German occupation, actually. The Germans were still here. We are smart. 1941, we're going to do the same. Yeah? And at the end of the war, somehow we managed to do the same. So 1918 is here the trigger. 1940 is here the trigger, with some relating back to 1918 as well. Now, Jewish side. Because for the power relations, you need all the people involved. I can't talk about the Poles. I don't know about the Poles. This region, actually, I don't know about. I know a little, but not enough. The Jewish side. Do we find a trigger like that for the Jewish side? Not really. What we do find when you look at 41, at the Jewish side, why didn't they flee, for example? Why didn't all of them run away? Avoid the trap. Why didn't they avoid the trap? Go back to World War I. We know them. The elder generation said, we know them. It's going to be harsh. They're going to be victims. They're going to be sufferings. Yeah? But basically, it's possible to survive. And they're better than the Bolsheviks. This kind of thinking was there. Yeah? Younger ones thought, most of the people who fled were the younger ones. They said, no, come on, you stay and we go and then we come back. Because they didn't believe the Red Army would be beaten that easily. Yeah? But for the time being, okay. Now, the methodological point is to ask and to reconstruct on the basis of what the groups themselves say and what they document. What are our experiences and what leads us and what sort of determines our value system, which determines then the choices you make. Yeah, that's also what explains the changes over time. German behavior changed over time. Lithuanian behavior changed over time. Jewish behavior changed over time based on the experiences you make, meaning on the interpretations of what you live through. This determines then, with the expectations, what your choices. Very often false choices, fatal choices, but it determines what you decide to do now. Going this, here's this, or this. Yeah. Now, fundamental is to have the various perspectives. The Germans were not almighty, explained only half. Yeah. In Lithuania, for example, they relied on the cooperation. Not only Lithuania, in all of Europe, basically, they relied on the cooperation of the non-German, non-Jewish forces. Everywhere. Yeah? Because they only had a few people.
Can I interject?
Yes.
You're using the word cooperation instead of the term collaboration. Is there a reason as to why you're using this? I've
Yeah.
I've seen, I've heard you do this. Is there like is it random or is it?
No. It's because collaboration has the same problem as genocide, for example. You only ask collaborator yes or no.
Okay.
You want to be a judge, yes or no, and to what degree? Yeah, and this doesn't explain in any way why people have made their choices.
Okay.
So it's a judicial term which is useless after the end of World War II. Before that, it had a different tone, but it turned into a pejorative term through German occupation of all of Europe, and each country, each state. What was the first thing that the French made? The French made. We are a nation of resistors, and we have a few 10,000s of collaborators, and we have a few 10,000s of women who went with the Germans, and we externalize them. And then we are fine a nation of resistors. Any idea what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then this externalizing of guilt to the ones who are sort of in this fictitious, in this virtual court of history. They are out. They are the ones. Yeah. And the other ones. And cooperation is also it's too neutral actually, but I don't have a better word. Participation is like too much on the same level. But I can decide, okay, I cooperate with this, but I don't cooperate on this. Yeah? Because most cooperation of the people inside Lithuania and all over Europe was only partial. Only partial. Yeah? So, and the reason is, again, I don't want judicial terms in historiographical thinking.
Okay. And you're doing that in the book as well?
Really?
In the book.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things sort of brought up, but the voices of Jews, the voices or the perpetrator's perspective, as inaccurate as this term might be, we're still using it. The voices of victims and those who participated in local Lithuanians. Are there any groups, and that is probably one of the reasons I think your book is very important, are there any groups that you think are often neglected in the story of the Holocaust when we talk about the Holocaust in Lithuania?
Yes, of course there are. I come to that in a second. I want to make, from the judicial terms, the only ones I keep actually in my own writing is victim. I keep that one. I do keep it. I don't so. Perpetrator are hardly used. I say those responsible. Yeah? Those responsible. Verantwortlich. Those responsible. Yeah? And for the ones on the medium level, I say, again, it's about power and choice and responsibility. And power means, what can I influence? What can I influence? Now this old definition of Max Weber of power, can I force you to do what I want? That's a Weberian, that's the basic definition of power in sociology. Can I force you to do what I want? Meaning, can I influence what is happening? Yeah, and this not from top to bottom, but and here I use actually Foucault. Yeah, sort of the highly debated, because he said power is an effect of relations. It's not something you own. It's being reproduced all the time as an effect of relations. Yeah. So I'm only powerful if you obey. If you refuse to obey, my power is gone. Unless I force you. And then it's direct, hard power. But much more dangerous, soft power. I ask something and you do, yes, of course, we do. We obey. If this is gone, then it gets really difficult for the ones in power. Yeah? Collapse of 1991 of the Soviet Union, same thing. Yeah? It did, no, the power utensils at the top were still there, but the relations were completely changed. And the people who would obey, where did they go? They got so. That's the acting groups. Now, victims. Victims of the Shoah. It's overall from the victims of crimes during World War II and the Shoah, about 45%. About within Lithuania itself, as well as overall. I think it's more or less true for all of Europe. 45%, meaning you have 5.8 million Jews murdered in Europe during the Shoah, 5. That's the most approximate number I'm sort of, yes, that's a good number. And we have about 12 to 13 million victims of crimes. 12 to 13 millions of crimes. This is not the people who died, but of crimes. Yeah? So this is about 45%. In Lithuania, we have about 200,000 Lithuanian Jews murdered, yeah? And we have about 420,000 victims. That is, again, more or less 45%. Prisoners of war, yeah, huge group, and actually the first large group which was murdered. Before most of the Jews were killed, in all of Europe, all of Eastern Europe, so prisoners of war were murdered. So not inside Lithuania is a bit of a special story, but when you look at Eastern Europe as a whole, occupied Soviet Union, within the first half year till spring 42, we have 3 million victims. Yeah? 1 million Jews, 900,000, and more than 2 million Soviet prisoners of war. And a few 10,000 here, a few 10,000 there. But that's a rough number. And then it turns around. The longer the war goes, the more Jews are being murdered. You know, in Aktion Reinhardt, you know, the killing of the Polish Jews, yeah, and the Hungarian Jews, etc., etc. So, huge group, yeah, and that this question is possible at all. Were there other groups which we tend to forget? I mean, how do you forget about 3 million people? How is that possible? You know, in Vilnius, yeah, we have the ghetto and we have these huge prisoners of war camps, and dying in the tens of thousands, countless as well, and all over the country. Yeah? Has anybody asked what is the relations between them? Where are the relations? What from the perpetrator view? What connects these groups? There's a third one coming later. Yeah, Soviet evacuees. Yeah, I just talked to this historian Mantas is here. Mantas, your last name is Signevichus, right? What's your last name? No. Just talked to him because he's also doing research on the prisoners of war and the Soviet evacuees. There's no research on this. No, nothing. Yeah, there is something from the Soviet side, but bits here, pieces here and there. So for this study, for this big study, where I tried I didn't want to as a good German, I don't exclude anybody. I include everybody. Yeah. Oh my God! Now you have to do all the Erbsenzählen, we would say in German. So the counting the peas. You have to sort of go from county to county and ask how many here, how many there, when, who did it, etc., etc. Yeah, and then come up with some generalizations based on sources, not some reports where you can't, which you can't verify. Everything you say must be based on sources. Everything. Yeah. So now prisoners of war in the picture, Soviet evacuees, 43, 44 are in the picture, and then we have the smaller groups. Yeah. The first ones are, of course, one of the first ones are, of course, the patients of psychiatric hospitals, yeah, which was the first big German victim group in Germany. The people in those who were disabled, either mentally or physically. The first 70,000 victims of the largest group were actually ethnic Germans, which were not supposed to eat, yeah, and which were not valuable for the people's community. Yeah. And it's the same here. And now, one of the differences to look at is Jewish psychiatric patients were all murdered in autumn 41, all of them, by the Germans, with Lithuanian help. Now, Lithuanian patients were not murdered. Now, the Germans suggested in 43, it's like 400 or 500 people we're talking about only. It's time. We have to take them out. They are a burden. Yeah? And immediately, Lithuanian intellectual elite, within the administration and outside, and within the medical spheres, said, no, don't do that. And what did the Germans do? Okay, we'll leave you alone. We won't risk the readiness to cooperate from you just because of these few hundred people. Yeah?
I'll have to stop you at
Yes.
this point. I think we've been talking for quite a bit
What's
of time.
Time flies, sorry.
15 minutes.